We're turning to hurling. I'm delighted to say Seamus Hickey is with us. Seamus, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning, mate. How are we?
The Declan Hannon news is really, really important, and it kind of slipped out a little bit under the radar for the rest of the country. I presume it was a bit of a seismic shock to Limerick hurling fans in particular. What can they do to somehow make up for the loss of him as a hurler and also as a leader on the pitch?
Yeah, so to me this is big, right? So this is I didn't get any indication when he was able to carry himself off the field. In fairness, he came off under his own steam in the Munster final. I got no impression that it was going to be. I didn't even think it was the knee. So it was something that was a little bit unexpected, I would say, and I would say huge impact. Personally, I hold Declan up there as, you know, one of the top three components of that whole successful setup. Captain, leader, player, quality of the way he plays number 6. You know, so for me, you're talking about impact. It's a big impact. Can other players on the Limerick squad play 6? Yes, they can. No problem. That'll happen. You'll likely see Dan Morrissey go to 6, and you'll see Mike Casey go to 3, and you'll bring in Richie English probably, or one of the new guys who's pushing Richie for a cornerback spot. But it's what Declan brings to the overall. It's his presence, his leadership on the field particularly. And I probably said this a couple of times and at risk of repeating myself, but the times when he has been off the field in the last 4 years have been the times when I think this Limerick team has looked vulnerable and just not, definitely not at their best. So, for me, big impact. Hoping that it's one of those things where if we progress beyond the semi-final, that there's a chance of him being there the big day. But you can only take the days as they come, and it'll be a tough test regardless of who comes through Galway or Tipperary for Limerick to face without him.
We'll talk about Galway and Tip in a moment, but just to tease this out a little bit more, what is it that makes him such a special leader? Let's talk about the hurling in a moment, but what are leadership qualities? How do they manifest themselves?
So it's interesting, right? So I played under a good few captains in Limerick back through the years, and some really, really excellent captains, I suppose. But when to me, one of the best ones that comes to mind, you're talking about the likes of Donald O'Grady, Dodge. We won a Munster in 2013, right? A more quiet leader, not all about talk. Very much about leading by actions, right? So Declan falls into that category. And then when John Kiley came in, we had James Ryan for his first year when John Kiley was manager, and James Ryan was captain. But then James retired, and it was a big decision as to who you're going to pick from this group. You had a huge amount of emerging talent from the All-Ireland 21 winners of 2016. With big names, the likes of Cian Lynch. You're talking about the likes of, you had Garrod Hegarty in there, you had Dermot Burns, we had Sean Finn on the scene at that stage. So we had some exceptional talent and leaders coming through from that group of players. You had some of the guys who were still around. You had the likes of the senior guys like myself. You had Nicky Quaid, you had Graham Mulcahy. So you had a good mix of people. And when he chose Declan, it was one of those decisions that when you make it rests really easy on the group. It rests very, very easy. If you're talking about a guy that everybody respects, admires, exceptionally likable, that all makes a difference in a dressing room. So for me, that's a huge part of it. It's and I don't. It feels like a bit of a love letter to Declan Hannon, but it was for me. He was exceptionally likable. In terms of the guys you respect and why you respect them, Declan is right up the top for me. He went through his own tough journey with Limerick. He had his real rough day in 2013, the All-Ireland semi-final against Clare, as a really young guy, missing frees, playing centre forward. And that was a really tough experience for him personally. And he's a guy that doesn't wear his emotions on his sleeve, really. So you want to be close to know it. So for me, the respect was there because we knew what he'd gone through, the person he was, the ability that he had, and when he made that move from the forwards to the backs, there's a lot of people kind of wondering at the time as to, is that a good move? Because he was what I would have said one of our most talented forwards. To me, at that stage, it was probably still a lot of it was potential. He really hadn't tapped the depths of what he could do in the forwards. But as soon as he went back to 6, he was really comfortable in his own skin and had an influence on the game that was kind of even more his style, and it was more enabling the guys around him and elevating the guys around him as opposed to putting himself on the pedestal. So, to me, it fit in a lot of ways.
Seamus, because of all those leadership qualities and skills that Declan Hannon possesses that you mentioned there, and I know it seems strange to maybe put a positive spin on an injury like this, which is such a significant game, but it can almost inspire a team, can't it? When you lose your leader, your on pitch veteran, I guess, it can nearly bring the rest of the team to another level for a semi-final, can't it?
Yeah, win one for the Gipper kind of thing. Yeah,
kind
but it can. But I suppose we had any kind of exact? Well, so Cian Lynch last year, right? So Cian Lynch last year was very present in the dressing room, whole year out, more or less, or the whole championship year, out with that really really bad ankle injury. And to be fair, that I would say there's an example of a player being out and rallying around that guy. Let's do it for Cian, and then on the Hogan stand, lifting the Liam McCarthy last year as vice captain, lifted it with Declan, and that was a really really it was a lovely moment. But even talking to the guys in the dressing room, it meant a lot to them that Cian was up there. So yes, I accept that, and in those moments you can turn a negative into a positive. It's kind of different when it happens mid-year. I would say, especially in the lead up to a game. I'm not a negative person by most senses, but for me, the loss of Declan isn't good. If I'm a player in the dressing room, if I flip over so I'm on the outside looking in, and to me, this is not a good thing. If I'm on the inside, this is just a thing that you're trained psychologically to next man up, next person in. And reality, that's how it works, right? So you make adjustments. In training games, you have different people playing 6 anyway, because you can't have 2 Declan Hannons playing A and B. So there's different roles and different scenarios in which you play out on the field as a player. So there will be a next man up mentality. There will be, we'll get on with this, and there will be an element of our captain's down, and let's get to the next stage for him. But players compartmentalise all these things, and I know you've talked to a lot of them that it's very hard to get a real kind of a beat on what actually you feel about the situation, because you're trained to blinker yourself and to not react. So to me, it's a negative from the outside. From the inside, I know that that's just going to get on.
His record as captain is now all-time great in terms of captaining teams to win Munster championships, particularly after the 5 in a row. He's literally in a bracket of some of the best hurlers ever to have played the game. So there's obviously going to be some knock-on in terms of what happens next. But can I just ask you one last thing before we move on to the game? The transition from free taking forward to a pivot 6, was that an obvious thing? Had he done this at underage level? Was it something that was spotted and is again maybe an understated part of this whole thing? You said it was one of the 3 main components. I'm like, okay, well that's are Kinnerk and Kiley the other 2? That's the level where we're operating at here.
Yeah, so the other 2 for me are your backroom team and continuity of. So yes, the quality of your coach, your manager, and then let's add in all the other terrific people that are in that backroom team, the likes of Caroline, the likes of Shawnee, the likes of all the amazing, even Brian Geary and Dodge, who were selectors over the 3 years. So yeah, but to me it's huge because your presence at 6 and hadn't played 6, and I'll touch on then as to why he had done it before. So he had played with Ardscoil Reach 6, he had played underage Limerick 6, so he had done this and played very well. And there was this kind of debate as to Limerick need scoring forwards at the time versus but he's really good 6, but we need scoring forwards. It was kind of the same Kyle Hayes debate when Kyle came in, was he's actually really good in the forwards, but he's a better 7. Do we play players where they're best? or do we play them where the team needs them to play? And in essence, I get that, because that was kind of most of my career, was playing where the team needs you to play rather than where you're best at. And you just so that there's a kind of there's a trade-off there, and there's always a debate. But I played 6, and you really need somebody who's a super communicator, because your 6 has to stay and to sit. And Declan, you'll always see Declan, he never pulled out of position. It's super rare anytime he's ever pulled out of position, because his positional awareness is exceptional. If you're going to do that and your centre forward is going to sit off you, well, then you have to be a really, really good communicator and trust your midfield particularly, and your half forwards, and again how critical the Limerick half forwards are to the whole success of the operation, right? They all have to take the responsibility of a floating 11. Sometimes that was Tony Kelly. Sometimes even in recent times, you'd Noel McGrath playing that for Tipperary this year. So you have to have exceptional communication skills, trust, and then obviously the positional awareness. So things that I would have found, they're not givens. You can be good at one or maybe not all, but for me, he was just one of those really, really calm, collected, and good decision making 6s. To me, he was a Shawnee McMahon. And I can't speak highly of anybody, more highly of anybody than to compare him to Shawnee Mac, because I thought he was the greatest 6 I ever saw. So to me, when he was playing underage, he flashed that. But Ars Golrishi he played 6, and he was really, really good. On successful teams too. So he wasn't just playing 6 on teams that that weren't doing great. So for me, it was there, and it was always the trade-off of we need forwards in Limerick, we need scoring forwards, we need big physical presences in at 11, or whether play 10, 12 as well. Do we play him up there, or do we put him back 6? And I suppose we had a couple of different 6s before he went back. You see, we'd Wayne McNamara, we'd Gavin O'Mahony, we had a couple of different guys play that and play it well, I would have thought. But he has played it great.
Is there any possibility that they have a Garrod Hegarty style inspiration, or is the obvious one the one that you started with here, where it's Morrissey and it's as obvious a replacement that they don't overthink this at all?
So it's part of the Dan Morrissey story for me, right? So Dan Morrissey is such a wild card. To me, he grew into the team and started to play exceptionally well at 5, and everybody was like, his time has come, this is great, he's finally found his niche, and all the hard work that he's done. And again, talking about a hugely respected guy inside the dressing room, incredibly well got. So he found his niche at 5, and then Mike Casey does his knee, and you're looking for and Mike Casey then was our established 3, and then he does his knee, and we're like, okay, we need something, and the option was there to play Sean Finn there or play Richie English there, but said, what, we're going to play Dan there, and JJ Delaney to me was again a phenomenal impact player for Kilkenny when he went from 7 to 3. And to me, it was bizarre. It was a bizarre move at the time. And I again, speaking from experience, I did that. I went from 7 to 3 in 2017. I played 7, and I went back to playing 3, and I played 3 earlier in my career. It's not easy, and I was never good at 3 at all. So I know how hard that is. And Dan did it and played 3 then as an all-star fullback. So that's what leads me to think that. And in the league as well, Dan has played 6 in Declan's absence. So, it's really about the capability of Dan Morrissey as well to just play the role, play it really well without fanfare or flair or a lot of things that are showy, but exceptionally effective. And I would see him to do that. And then you have the natural 3 to sit in there in Mike Casey. So I don't think it requires a huge amount of overthinking. Garrod did play 7 in the All-Ireland Under-21s team of 2016. He did play 7 and played it well. So, yeah, it's that would be a wild card. That's not on brand for John Kiely and the management team. So for me, it's Dan Morrissey with a huge amount of trust, and then obviously Mike to 3. But stranger things can happen.
Seamus, where are you sitting on this Galway-Tipperary match this weekend? Because you look at the two teams and two very dissimilar positions heading into the game. I guess Tipperary with that quite extraordinary 7-38 put up against Offaly last weekend, and then Galway still presumably reeling from the nature and way in which they lost that Leinster final to Kilkenny. So I guess two teams coming into it with two very different mindsets.
Yeah. So that's 7:38 now. It has to be qualified. So I was there. I was in Tullamore for it on Saturday. Offaly played a different competition this year, and are a team that are making strides and making progress in a lot of ways. But they were literally it was like two teams from completely different stratospheres of hurling. What Tip got from that game and what we'll carry through to the Galway game is the fitness of Ford, the fitness of Morris. Even the likes of Craig Morgan played well when he played his first game in 8 months. Really, really quick turnaround from the knee injury he had. Now, unfortunately, he hobbled off the field in the second half, but I'm hoping that was only a small thing. But even to see him back for the group of players, the last games he played was the game in which Dylan Quirk passed away. So talking about a return to the field being emotional and trying. So, a lot of positives in the health front for Tipperary to come out of that game, because the hurling, it's kind of hard to read a whole pile into that. It's not going to prepare you for Galway. But yeah, the other side then, Galway, it's a sucker punch, and it was crazy to see it. But it's kind of. It's tough to read this Galway team at the moment for me. The Dublin game, that was always plausible for me, because I saw Dublin coming really strong. Dublin were kind of gathering momentum and playing well, and some of their key players, and particularly Sutcliffe is having a super year, and Birkin set forward is absolutely superb, and so that was always possible. And Galway were really poor for 40 minutes of that game. So it's. I was wondering whether this Galway team are we making progress here under Sheffield? So year one was really, really good. Put a really, really good fight up against Limerick in the All Ireland semi-final. But this year, I'm not sold on the Burke McInerney switch, and how vulnerable they are at the back, and the goals they've conceded have been shocking at times in terms of complete absence of presence in the middle. So, I'm just wondering, are they making the progress they need to make? Because their players are super. Their squad of players are really, really excellent. Accomplished in many ways. Young guys coming in. Nyland has been superb all year, on a college level and an inter-county level. So, yeah, they're coming from different different angles, but for me, this Galway Tip game is, it is a bit of a toss-up, because I still think Tipperary have demons that they have to banish, and until they banish them and until they prove it out, they're there. So it's not an easy one to script.
Who would Limerick prefer to play? That's writing Dublin off, so I don't mean to. But assuming Dublin don't beat Clare, then they'll play the winners of this game. Who would they prefer?
Good question. If I'm talking about playing styles, I think Limerick play Tipperary really well. I think Limerick normally do well against Tipperary in the round robin. They still weren't at the pitch of it really. I thought that they could have kicked on more in the second half than they did, and they didn't really hit the top gear. And then it was still Tipperary that came back to draw it. But I think that Limerick have played Tipperary really well the last 4 or 5 years. I know that Cahill has them playing a bit more aggressive up front, and I suppose what I did take from Saturday against Offaly was the appetite of the forwards, and really the impact of Jake Morris. Jake Morris has been in terms of his scoring, that's fine, but his intent, and Mark Keogh as well, the intent to turn over defenders, that has changed under Cahill, and that will make it a bit more difficult for Limerick. But I'm just saying, I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, Limerick have played Tip quite well, and the league semi-final and even the round robin suggest that still is the case.
Okay. I don't mean to write Dublin off. I actually do think that there's a good chance that they could cause Clare problems, because there's a potential for a Clare hangover from the Munster final. Last year they struggled against Wexford.
So Clare, I think Clare are in a different place than they were last year. Dublin got a much better test off Carlow than Tipperary got off Offaly. Okay, so I have to call this out, right? So Carlow are a good bit further along in where they are compared to Offaly. Especially, the Joe McDonagh champions on fully on merit, right? And to me, they gave Dublin a far better test than Offaly did. But Dublin are coming, right? So in Nolan Park against Kilkenny, Dublin were playing really threatening hurling with a really strong performance from the half forward line. Midfield was doing a lot of physical, dirty work around the middle of the field that. Chris O'Leary's been very, very good for the midfield, the former Cork senior hurler. So, to me, Dublin have looked far better under Micheál Donoghue this year than they have in the last 3-4 years. For me, I think they have made progress, and they will challenge Clare. There's no maybe. My worry about Dublin is whether they can sustain it, and they haven't sustained it. They couldn't sustain it in Nolan Park against Kilkenny when they were the better team for good stretches of that game. They couldn't sustain it against Galway when they were the best, the far better team for the at least 40 minutes of the game. And Galway were going to get their purple patch, but it turned into a purple half, and they really did. They were lucky to get the score at the end. But to me, I still think Clare are in a different space mentally. Clare lost the Munster final with what I would say, with something left in the tank.
Okay.
12 wides. The wides really, especially at crucial times, they hadn't done that in previous games. They hadn't done it against Cork. They hadn't done it against Limerick. So to me, they actually lost the Munster final with something left in the tank. Last year, I felt like they spent themselves, and they spent themselves in extra time. They emotionally, physically, I thought they were empty after the Munster final last year, and it showed against Wexford, and it showed in the ultimately against Kilkenny. So I think they're in a different place. I think Brian Lohan has really got them tuned a bit different this year. All
right, we'll leave it there. Seamus, great stuff. Thanks a million for joining us. Cheers.
Do you mind if I give a shout out to Neil McManus?
Oh yeah, totally. We should mention it.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
No. Do you mind if I do? Just as a peer, right? You're talking about guys who have had impacts on their counties, right? So Neil McManus' impact on Antrim is disproportionate. He goes down as one of the greatest Antrim hurlers of all time for me. And as a peer, as someone who had to mark him, someone who got to hang around with him in an off the field context, I couldn't respect a guy more in the game of hurling. And I think it is right that he gets his day. And yes, slightly off Broadway, but a greater ambassador and servant to the game of hurling you're not going to find.
Yeah, I really hope that he's got a future involved off the field for Antrim hurling, as somebody who has soldiered through and is beginning to see what he sees as a return to where Antrim should be at the top level of hurling. And you'd hope that the Antrim County Board are looking at some way to keep him involved at whatever level he's able to commit to.
Yeah, I'd say whether the Antrim County Board want him involved, he's going to be involved. He's that guy. He loves it. He loves Antrim. He loves hurling. There's no way he's not. So, but I'd wish him the very, very best in everything he does.
100%. Seamus, good shout at the end there. Thanks a million. Cheers.
See you, man. Bye.
Seamus Hickey with the required shout at the end. A good call.